Afternoon. It's my pleasure today to talk to Louisville-based saxophonist Ron Jones. Jones's quartet will be playing at the Hall in Louisville on Sunday, April 30th at 7 p.m. as part of the Louisville Jazz Society's Signature Series.
Yeah.
So, Ron, you're born and raised in Louisville, right?
Yes, sir.
So when did you begin playing saxophone and what was your introduction to jazz?
I started playing saxophone when I was in seventh grade at Duval Junior High School, is what they called it then, junior high, not middle school, because it went from seventh to ninth grade.
Right.
And then high school was 10th, 11th, 12th. So I started then, and I really didn't even want to play saxophone. I started because I came home and told my dad that I wanted to play trumpet. And he said, why do you want to play trumpet? And I said, well, it looks cool. It's got three buttons and it looks cool. And he talked me into trying the saxophone. And not long after that, someone gave my mom a saxophone. Her daughter, her son used to play, and he just kind of gave it up. It was sitting around. I still have it in the closet back behind me. So I started playing saxophone in seventh grade. That's how I got started.
Right. And so when did you discover jazz?
That came probably in high school, because my dad was a big proponent of me becoming a musician. I mean, he loved music and he got all of us lessons. So he used to try to get me to listen to jazz, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it, because at the same time I was a guitar player. And actually, I used to be a rock and roll guitar player. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, I played all the Kiss, Rush, Kansas, Led Zeppelin, all of that stuff. And I still have my Gibson SG in the closet back there. So, but
right next to the old saxophone.
Oh, yeah. And when I went to high school, my old band director, Bobby Edwards, who was his band director at Central, he gave me a record by Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie at Massey Hall. You remember that old record, the Jazz at Massey Hall?
Yeah.
And he just one day, he saw I had interest, and one day he said, "Here, take that home and learn it." And back then, that's what you had to do. You had the record player, and you had to lift the needle and just lift. So I learned a Charlie Parker solo off of there called Bloom Dido, and then I was into Hank Crawford. I was into that type of stuff. And then I started listening to Jackie McLean. And what drew me into jazz was the feel of the eighth notes. The eighth notes, the feel, the swing is what drew me into it. Because for some reason, I didn't really dig it at first. But that's how I got started.
Right. And the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
What been your experience playing here in Louisville? Does the music scene here shape the way you play and your career?
Well, the music scene here in Louisville was, when I was coming up, it was vibrant, man. There was like places to play all over the place, and there were a lot of older musicians to play with. I mean, I had the of course, I was studying with Jamie Aebersold and people like that, David Baker. I went to the camps and I did all this stuff. And then I was a teacher at the camps, for Jamie's camps, for about 11, 12 years, faculty. And so it was very vibrant. And the older guys, were a big part of my development. There was a group that I was involved with when I got home from college called Sound Chaser, with me, Hubert Griffin, Butch Neal, and Steve Cruz. And we were together for a pretty good while. And, I guess in the 80s, I wanted to record or do some recording. And it was kind of hard to get the guys involved with that. They really didn't feel the same way I did. So I put together a demo of my own, and I started recording. And then that led to me traveling to Cincinnati and play gigs with these great musicians like John Von Ohlen, Cal Collins and Phil DeGreg and Steve Schmidt and Art Gore and Bob Bodley, who used to play with Art Farmer. And I wound up from there playing at the Blue Wisp. I wound up getting these gigs at the Greenwich Tavern. Then I played at Jilly's with a great trumpet player by the name of Terrell Stafford, who's really a world-renowned trumpet player. So the opportunities blossomed from being around good musicians and musicians at the time that were playing better than I was. I was just trying to get in there, man. But they had a lot of respect for me as a young player because they always were very complimentary. They always were very encouraging because they knew I was serious about the music. Each time I'd come back to Cincinnati, I would be better. I would know more tunes because as a jazz musician, I think it's important for all musicians, not just a jazz musician, but to learn from the older cats and be around them because when you're playing with people that of like, it's hard to generate that knowledge sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Right. And the experience, it wasn't like a clinic they were teaching me all this, hey man, do this right here, do this right there. It was just being there and just listening.
So was there any particular time that was particularly memorable for you when you think back on it now? Any particular musicians you played with that was a memorable experience?
Well, I would say I've done some like jam sessions. One time there was a place on Oak Street called the Rudyard Kipling. You probably remember the Rudyard Kipling.
Remember it? Yeah, yeah.
I had a jam session there. What it was good, man. It went to Marcellus. And it was me, Don Braden, Wynton Marcellus, Tyrone Wheeler, Steve Cruz, and get the drummer's name. Anyway, and that was great, man. Just playing with the level of a Wynton Marcellus, because I mean he's probably the baddest musician I've ever played with, the greatest musician I've ever played with and been on stage with. His brother Branford Marcellus, I played with his quartet at the I was telling you about it the other day. It was Phoenix Hill.
Phoenix Hill, right.
And that was the experience, man, because it was totally out of left field. I was talking to him on a break, and he found out. I introduced myself after the first show. I said, hey, man, do you know Don Braden? He's, oh, yeah, I know Don. Well, Don's from Louisville. We're good friends. And, oh, man, come on upstairs. And so we sat upstairs and talked music for an hour and a half, just about music, life, sports. He's a big sports person. And then he goes, you got your horn? I said, yeah.
Carry it everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I had it in my trunk because I just come from teaching. Right. But I didn't want to take it in. I would never assume to do something like that. And so he said, well, come on, play some blues. We're just going to play some blues. And I said, oh, no. And then right after he said that, Kenny Kirkland, Bob Hurst, and Jeff Watts walked in. He said, hey, man, Ron's going to play with us on the next set. And they were like, yeah, man. So, funny story, I was kind of uptight about it. So I called my dad, told him what was going on. And I said, I got an opportunity to play with Wynton's brother, Branford Marcellus. And he said, you gonna do it? I said, no. He said, man, don't be a coward.
That's good advice.
We had a great relationship like that. And so I played, and it was really good for me. It was really good for me. I've been in a lot of situations like that where I played with really great musicians that were better than me. And it made me stronger. It didn't make me weaker. It made me stronger because I'm just that type of person anyway.
Right.
But a lot of times cats shy away from being in an uncomfortable situation. There was a musician around here by the name of Boogie Morton, older musician, great player, man. We used to have these jam sessions, and he'd just call a tune out of nowhere, not even tell you the key you're playing in. 1, 2. He called a tune, but he would never tell you what key, and you just had to go for it. And there's nothing wrong with learning how to play music like that. Sometimes trial under fire is the best way to do it, to make yourself a little on the uncomfortable side.
Right. Push your limits.
Yeah. So I play with those guys, and a number of really great musicians at Jamie's camp. Rufus Reed I played with a bunch of times, and I played with Ed Thigpen once, the drummer from Oscar Peterson,
Right.
with the Ray Brown Trio. I played with him at Jamie's camps. Played with Jimmy Rainey all the time. That was a real class clinic every time. I mean, it wasn't like a clinic, but for me, it was just like listening to these beautiful melodies all the time. I mean, this dude played with Charlie Parker. You know, I play with Slide Hampton. I mean, just a whole bunch of cats, man. But um, you know, I've been very fortunate, very
Right.
blessed.
Well, you talk about this in terms of your own education. You're a jazz educator too. You got a degree from Florida A&M in jazz education, right? So
No, actually, not jazz education, music
uh,
education.
music education. Okay.
Yeah, because when I was there, there was no kind of jazz degree. But
Gotcha.
the when after I left, they had since uh, come up with I think they have a degree in jazz. I'm not sure, but they have a lot more jazz courses because after I left, you know, Wycliffe Gordon, the trombonist with Lincoln Center, Wycliffe Gordon and Vincent Gardner, who's the lead trombonist with Jazz at Lincoln Center now, those guys came up after I did.
Right.
And that's when the jazz program started really blossoming more.
Mm. So education, jazz education, music education, but jazz education specifically has been a big part of your career. And I remember talking to some other jazz educators here in town, Gabe Evans, Chris Fitzgerald, etc. And they've
Right.
always talked about how important their students were for their own development. Can you talk a little bit about how being a jazz educator has shaped your career and your playing?
Well, I can talk about that from a different perspective because, believe it or not, I don't have a whole lot of jazz students. I teach mostly classical saxophone.
Really?
A lot of people don't know that. Yeah, because I'm the sax teacher at YPAS. And
Right.
so the kids, I mean, they're playing like way different stuff from jazz. Like not even, you know, I do have some students that I work with jazz, that I teach jazz. Most of my teaching comes outside of the city where I go out and do these clinics at high schools or colleges. Past 3 or 4 years, I've been going out and giving these concerts / lectures on the history of jazz at different colleges. And man, you talking about rewarding, been very rewarding because I feel like I'm giving the audience and people who don't know jazz or don't understand jazz really a good foundation as to how to even start listening to jazz. Because a lot of people that don't understand jazz, they don't like jazz. But when
Right.
you explain it to them in an educated format, along with playing, and present it to them a certain way, it's a whole different thing. And especially for our young people to be able to hear that, because they're just like everybody else. They want to listen to what's current. But as far as being an educator teacher, my students keep me on my toes. They keep me on my toes, man.
Yeah.
And you have to, you know, you have to stay abreast of whatever's going on, whether it be in the jazz world or just the classical saxophone or just playing the saxophone in general. And I've been fortunate that I've done enough I've just accumulated a wealth of knowledge on how to tell people what to do, you know, a lot of situations. Um, so I would say it keeps me on my toes. Uh, I'm never kind of thinking that I've arrived and know it all. I'm always learning. And I
Yeah.
learn a lot from my kids sometimes because they'll go to somewhere and they'll say, "Hey, man, Mr. Jones, so and so told me this." I said, "Really? Let me see that." And I'll use that stuff, you know.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah. So mutual learning experience. So,
totally.
can you tell us a little something about what the audience can expect to hear at the cafe on April 30th?
Hmm. Well, I would say they're going to be in the group is going to be myself on alto sax.
Right.
Todd Hilton is going to be playing piano. Tyrone Wheeler on bass and Kiko Cibrian on drums.
Great. It's a great
This group,
band.
yeah, it's a good group. This group of really good musicians, and the whole thing about playing music is to play together, have fun, and communicate. I would say that the people are going to hear a lot of swinging. That's what I'm about. I mean, if it's got to be swinging and emotion, feeling, fun, you know, fun with the concert. We're gonna play some tunes that that people probably don't hear that often. I mean, not anything crazy, but songs like we're gonna play this one tune by Wayne Shorter called United. It's a great tune, man. It's just a great vehicle to play on, swinging, hard hitting, driving. There's a ballad that I discovered years ago on a record with Oscar Peterson Trio plus Sonny Stitt. And the ballad is called The Gypsy, written by a guy named Billy Reed, not the sports writer Billy Reed, but another Billy Reed. And then we're going to do one of my tunes called One for Julian. This is a tune that I wrote for Cannonball Adderley, who, by the way, went to Florida A&M, Cannonball and Nat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I wrote something else down. Oh yeah. And Todd Hildreth and I, we're gonna do a duet on a tune called Exactly Like You. And it's gonna be in that vein of the Marcus Roberts, Wynton Marsalis duo, where they're playing that stride New Orleans type vibe. And I think the people will like it. I mean, I like to play a lot of different types of music. I mean, I'm more of the traditional, but I like contemporary jazz too. I like good music, but
Right.
this is going to be 110% traditional jazz. And
Right.
then we're going to play some blues and, different things.
Great. Sounds great. So a couple of your tunes, or at least one of your tunes, plus a lot of standards.
Yeah. Some standards.
And all swinging.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Some that are not what you would call a lot of people play. There are standards, but there's standards that are really played a lot. Then there's kind of some of these standards would be called a little bit of an obscure standard.
So we're not going to hear Autumn Leaves.
No, not this go round. I mean, when I play these concerts, I want to entertain the audience and I want them to have a good time. And I don't want to play stuff that they don't know. But at the same time, as a musician, you got to challenge yourself.
Right.
And you got to keep working at your craft, because if you keep playing the same things over and over, you're never going to grow to be a better player, improviser, or whatever. But I think the programming will be very good. I think the people will really like. I was talking to Wynton, who's the president of the Jazz Society. He said you all have had a lot of different groups, and the crowd loves all of it.
Yeah,
very appreciative.
We've got an audience that's open to a lot of different kinds of jazz and jazz adjacent music. So
right.
It's a good audience.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the show on Sunday, April 30th at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Again, it's the Louisville Jazz Society Signature Series. And hope lots of you can make it. Thanks so much for talking to me, Ron.
Thank you. Appreciate you.